What's going on, everybody? So you can see behind me that the Dodge is on the lift. Yay, we're actually getting to do something for myself for once. But I didn't film the whole first half of tearing this thing apart because I needed to do a lot of cleanup on it and a lot of weird stuff. But I'm going to show you guys what I did. So basically, my phone's going off because every time I pick up the camera or start to do some work, my phone starts going off because, you know, that's how it goes. But we took the factory springs out. We actually found that this spring on this side was broken. So there's the actual piece that was broken off of that spring. Busted. And we had some, you know, buildup in here from all the years of Pennsylvania weather, because that's where this truck came from, is PA. So I want to get all these cleaned up, get them treated for rust. I also wanted to treat the whole frame area here too for rust. It really isn't that bad considering, you know, now normally when we see these Northeast trucks or East Coast trucks or whatever, these pads, these buckets are completely rotted out, and there's literally surface rust on these. There's no rot whatsoever, which is amazing. Same goes for the frame itself. There's just a little bit of flaky surface rust, nothing crazy. So we really lucked out. But I wanted to get inside here and treat all of these little seams that had started some surface rusting, get all that stuff done, and just overall make sure that as we go along, we greased everything too. Make sure that as we go along, we're going to be taking care of all the little issues while we have it apart. So now the next step is we got to get the springs and the shocks in, and let me run over and show you guys what we got for springs and shocks. Shop is a disaster as always because we're super busy. It's like 11 o'clock at night right now and whatever. So we got, why is it so hard to open boxes one-handed? Rough Country 3-inch springs. Didn't want to go with any kind of a spacer or anything like that. I don't like doing that. I like going with springs, so I decided to go with the Rough Country 3-inch. So we got the 3-inch springs, and underneath these springs we have their, God, what are they? N2 shock? I think they're the N2s, the premium N2s. And we have a 1-inch lift block for the rear. So we're going to install these springs, the new shocks and everything, and then we'll bring you back and show you what it looks like. Springs and shocks are in. And actually, once you clean everything up, it's really not too bad to get done what you need to get done. So, you know, we cleaned up the top of the shock tower, got that all set, so those came right out. You know, it's easier to put the spring in with the shock inside it because you won't have to remove this top hat and slide the shock down through and all that other stuff, and that, you know, just put the spring in with the shock in the middle of it. It's just as easy. Got the shocks bolted down there. We got everything tied up there. Same thing on the passenger side. Now, the one thing you guys are going to run into if you're doing this yourself and you're doing it on jack stands, there's not enough travel in the suspension on the passenger side to get this spring in without actually having to compress the spring. Now, the problem is that this is a gigantic diesel spring. So using your little, you know, hook screw compressors that go on here is going to be extremely, extremely dangerous. So what I tend to do is I'll loosen up the control arm bolts, which gives you a little bit more of a range of movement, kind of takes the load off of the bushings. And then I'll put some sort of like a bottle jack, like the bottle jack off of my press. And we'll stick that underneath here somewhere and push up off the frame, and we'll be able to get the inch or inch and a half that we need to be able to slide the spring in. That's probably the easiest way to do it, short of, you know, risking your life with the spring compressors and taking apart the suspension and then having to put that back together and everything else. I found that with a little bit of gentle downward pressure, make sure things like your brake lines still have some slack and all that other stuff, and just push down on the axle a little bit, and you'll be able to kind of get the spring in there. It takes a little bit of effort, but you'll get it to pop right in. So 3-inch on these trucks is about the max. It is the max that you can go before you have to change the control arms, because you guys won't be able to tell, especially with the GoPro, but the wheel isn't centered anymore, and you can see that by the spring. So with the wheel being kicked back, as it rotates up, it's going to come forward. Now a 3-inch is still going to set the axle back just a hair. So in all reality, with a 3-inch, we should be doing adjustable control arms to push the axle forward. But with 3 inches, we are just at the point where we can get away with the stock arms. Any more than that, and we would definitely have to change those arms out. All right, guys, so the rear end of this thing is super easy. We basically have the shock, which the bolt sits way up in there, so that's kind of a pain. But we'll be able to get it. And then we take that shock bolt out. We take the factory U-bolts out. And then we replace it with the Rough Country stuff. We got 1-inch blocks and then new U-bolts to finish it off. So pretty easy overall. So I'm gonna get to this, get this knocked out, and then hopefully we'll set the truck on the ground with a new lift in it. And here's the back installed. Starting to lose my voice here. But just a 1-inch fabricated block right there. Spaces things out. Some new U-bolts, new nuts and washers, and of course a set of new shocks. And that is literally the entire rear. Now, a couple of the reasons why I like Rough Country so much is that overall, even with filming this, it took me 2.5 hours, 2 hours to do this lift setup. Now, granted, I have a lift here, so it's really not that bad. Doing it on the ground, expect to add a little bit more time, but the instructions are very, very precise. It's very easy to install these things, and you get a lot of bang for your buck, as they say. You know, Rough Country for years has gotten somewhat of a weird reputation, but over the years, they have been very, very good at reproducing things that are high quality. The shocks, the new premium N3s, I stand corrected, they're not the N2s, they're the N3s. Some of the better shocks that I've seen in a long time. And you know what? I had Rough Country on my very first Jeep probably 20 years ago, and I loved it. It never broke. I never had any issues with it. It rode fine. So, again, I mean, how can you complain? The price is right. I think this lift, if you go on their website, a 3-inch lift, which will get you into the 35s, is, I don't know, $379, $400. And that comes with springs and 4 shocks, the lift blocks, and the U-bolts. So how can you beat that? You can't. You really can't. So I'm going to put the tires back on this thing. We're going to set it down on the ground. I measured it before the lift, and we're going to measure it after the lift to see what we actually got. Of course, there's going to be some front spring settle, so maybe a little bit taller in the front than it will be finally once the springs settle out, but I want to get an idea of how much taller we are than what it was stock. All right, so I am not giving away what the wheels are just yet, but I will show you what the tires are going to look like and what we've got for protrusion. So we're looking pretty good. We got probably, I don't know, if you look at the fender round versus a tire, maybe an inch total. That is exactly what I was looking for. We don't want the wheels out here because that's dumb. We want them right here where we're almost flush with the body, sticking out just a little bit to where we can run a nice little fender flare, and it'll make it look good. And how about those BFGs, man? You cannot beat those tires. Well, it is done. Left the inner wheel wells out because we got some other stuff we want to install in there that need to have the wheel wells out. I got to get some new sway bar links and a few other odds and ends. So let me show you guys something funny. And this is true for every vehicle that you do a lift in. You can actually see it without the lift in the way. It's pretty level. Still got about a 1/2 inch rake to the front, just because when you load the bed, you don't want the Caroline to lean. So I'll show you how much this thing went up in the front. All right, so here's the original front measurement. It was about 37.5. Now here is what it's currently at. 42 inches. So we gained 37.5 to 42 is what, 4.5? So we gained 4.5 inches in the front, and then the rear, we were at 40 inches originally, and now we're at 42. So we gained almost 2 inches. We should only gain about an inch, but again, everything's still got to settle. It's still not quite at ride height, but kind of wanted to give you guys a little bit of an idea of why it always seems like the truck gets lifted higher when you put brand new stuff on. Now, number one, springs are brand new. They have not settled out yet. Still, to gain almost 5 inches of clearance on this lift is ridiculous, and you're like, well, it's only a 3-inch kit. It's not going to settle 2 inches, and you're correct. It's only going to settle about a half an inch or so. The reason is we got broken springs. There's actually the one part of the broken spring, and then we have worn out, rusty factory springs. Now, over time, the springs from the factory vehicle are going to literally destroy themselves, and that goes for every single vehicle. Springs are going to wear out, they're going to get soft, they're going to drop, and when you put a lift in with a brand new fresh spring, you're going to get some lift. Even if you were to put a factory OEM spring, I guarantee you would gain probably an inch of lift all the way around, just because the springs are new and they haven't been beat up all their life. Springs lose some of their actual strength and springiness over time. So putting new stuff in is going to get you higher than what you thought it was going to. Kind of like, never mind. What you're going to have to account for is if you determine that you only want 3 inches of lift, then you're going to need to determine how worn out your springs are, whether or not you should just go with a 2-inch versus an 1.5 inches versus a 3-inch. All depends on what you need, but you need to take that into account. So if you've got a garage where your top of your truck is going to hit, if you only go 3 inches, and if you go 4, you're screwed. Well, then you're going to have to do your research on it to make sure that everything is exactly where you want it. But now, with this truck, we don't care. It doesn't matter. It could be 40 feet tall, whatever. I just wanted to get it up in the air enough to clear the wheels and tires that we're putting on it, which you guys will see soon. Hopefully I didn't give them away. But what we've done so far, again, is we just kind of cleaned everything up in there. Cleaned up the frame, shot some rust preventer on it just to be safe. You know, new spring, and you can see that spring and that shock are pretty well straight. We've got room here. We've got room here. We're a little tight back here, but that's to be expected because, like I said to you guys, the axle is no longer perfectly centered in the wheel well. It's moved back just a little bit, and you can kind of get an idea by the spring and the shock are still on a little bit of a backward angle, and that's just due to the fact that we have factory control arms in there. If we did an extended custom track bar, we could literally extend the axle back out to where it needs to be, and you know what? Who knows? Maybe we'll do that in the future if we decide to go with more lift or yada yada, whatever. But for now, it's perfect. So we got all that done. We got some fender flares going in here to cover up this stuff. Yes, I plan on replacing these fenders and this hood, but for right now, like I told you guys, we want to get this thing mechanically sound. And part of that was the suspension. The suspension itself, obviously you can see, had a broken spring. So, not good. We had to get that done first. Other spring, had to get that done first. So now we've got shocks all the way around. We've got brand new springs. We've got a brand new steering shaft. I think we're going to have to put a starter in it, but luckily, right about there, there's a starter. I don't know where it came from, but I have a functional Cummins starter sitting over there. We got, you guys saw in the first video, we got all the lights working properly. Everything is coming together mechanically on this vehicle. We still have a little bit of a noise with one of the accessories. I think it's the AC compressor. We have to fix that. I want to do a valve adjustment on it. I want to do a bunch of just normal maintenance stuff that has not been done to this truck, and we'll be good. Okay, so I wanted to go over something quick with you guys that kind of has been coming to my mind, and I keep forgetting to mention it in a video. So you may take a look at this truck, and especially if you're from the southern or the western area, and say, that thing's a pile of shit. Why are you doing what you're doing with it? Why are you fixing it? Why are you spending all this money on it? Why are you doing X, Y, and Z? Well, around here in the Northeast, in the Connecticut area especially, trying to find one of these trucks for under $12,000. Let's just say you find an 06 single cab, long bed, 4-wheel drive for 10 grand. You go take a look at the truck. It is going to need probably $5,000 worth of work right off the rip. Guaranteed. So now you're into it for 15. In order to find a clean one of these, you're paying anywhere from 18 to 20,000 for a low mileage, and we're talking low mileage as in 150,000 miles or less. Body with zero rust, impossible to find up here unless you buy one from down south. So you're looking at anywhere from 15 to 20,000 for a clean one. That is something that's been well maintained, that hasn't been grabbed by some kid that put 16-inch wide wheels on it and drove it around and destroyed every ball joint and lug nut and wheel bearing in the truck. Expensive, very, very expensive. Then take into account the modified ones, you're paying 20 plus. We picked this truck up for way below $10,000, way below. And at the end of all the series of videos on this truck, I'll tell you what I paid, I'll tell you what I got into it. We'll do a full build breakdown of everything that we did. But I just wanted to assure you that for what we paid for this truck, we can literally put another $10,000 into it, and we will still be able to sell the truck and profit, which is not the idea. The idea was I wanted something for myself that I could build, and it's been a long, long time. This has always been one of my favorite trucks, and I'm just glad I've managed to find one. So with that being said, we'll go through everything that we spend on it and everything else, but you guys also have to be very well aware that just because you find something for a really good deal doesn't mean that you should buy it. Now, I could put another $10,000 worth of hard parts into this, but it's all my labor. If you had to put $10,000 worth of parts into this plus pay the labor, then no, this would not be worth it in any way, shape, or form. But because I can do the labor myself and I can do everything myself, I can afford to put another 10K into it. If you buy something like this, you may want to set yourself a budget and say, okay, let's just say you find one for $6,000 and it needs X, Y, and Z. Well, right off the rip, you're going to spend $5,000. So you're at 11. Okay, that's not too terrible. You got a good deal on the truck. You spend that $5,000, but that $5,000, what's that going to get you? Tires, wheels, and a lift installed. If you don't do it yourself, there's your $5,000 right out the door. Tires, wheels, and a lift. Done. So now you're at 11,000. So now if the truck needs any maintenance items, you're screwed. You're starting to put more money and more money and more money into it. Next thing you know, oh, it needs a turbo. Oh, it needs injectors. Oh, it needs, and now you're up to the $20,000 range and everything else. So if you can't do the work yourself, sometimes these things aren't a good deal. But I think we got a great deal on this thing. So at the end of all the, like I said, at the end of all the series of videos, we'll do a full build breakdown. We'll let you know how much it cost, what we got into it for time and labor, and hopefully you guys will enjoy the rest of it. But there it is in all its glory. 5 inches taller in the front, 2 inches taller in the rear. It'll settle. So we'll probably be 4 and 1.5 inches, I would imagine. Then we're going to add the tires. The tires are going to add another 1.5 inches to 2 inches to what we already just added to the suspension. So this thing's going to come up even higher, and should be fun to get in and out of with my old ass and my bad back. But we'll do our best. So have a good night, everybody. Hope you enjoyed this one. A little bit of lift action. Go check out Rough Country. They usually have everything you need, and I will see you on the next one.